Today we're going to be talking, really drilling into sort of a discussion, a crossroads, if you will, of the revisiting of infrastructure and the aging infrastructure, and also how companies and utilities, as well as policymakers, are working together to advance and to really bring things into the future here, both with green renewable energies, as well as looking to build upon environments, I guess I should say, both with existing infrastructure as well as with growth going forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panelists, I should say, and we'll start, I guess, from left to right here. So, introduce yourself.
Hi. Now I'm live.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jim Costin, native born, lived all my life in Chicago. My company is Corridor Rail Development. Our core business is that we supply remanufactured passenger rail rolling stocks to states and regional agencies who sponsor passenger train routes.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Knox. I am a partner at the Climate Infrastructure Group. The Climate Infrastructure Group, we are a consulting advisory firm that provides strategic advice to governments and corporations as it relates to financing opportunities and how to structure financing vehicles, specifically in the area of climate finance, infrastructure, and infrastructure-related projects.
And I'm Bill Fluler, Vice President of Engineering and Smart Grid for ComEd here, the local electric utility up in the northern part of the state here.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you attending today. We'll go ahead and start, I guess, first with James. So rail is sort of foundational to the region. It's sort of Chicago history's been built on it. Can you talk a little bit about how you and also Corridor Rail Development are looking at modernizing the rail industry?
Yes, absolutely. There's my mic again. Yes, in fact, our headquarters here is in Chicago, and we are working the last several months to jointly develop a facility in southeast Cook County in Sauk Village. The primary goal of this project is to create a large railroad intermodal container facility, logistics park, which the county and the Sauk Village and the surrounding municipalities have been aspiring to have created over the last 10 or 12 years. And we are going to be constructing a national fleet remanufacturing facility there, where we take cars that have been sidelined and rebuild them into new vehicles and put them into service for our customers, which again tend to be state and regional agencies who sponsor rail.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Larry, let's jump over to you. You've got an interesting perspective in your career. You've had both public sector, work, as well as private sector, and also in the investment banking community. How do you see those three sort of coming together here to help with infrastructure and infrastructure modernization?
Sure, thank you. So in terms of my background, it is a little bit varied and a little bit unique, both from a professional as well as a career standpoint. But where those three intersections lie as it relates to technology, engineering, and solving large major infrastructure projects for governments and municipalities. There's also the second aspect of that, which is policy. And what is the proper policy, both at the state and federal level, across the environmental aspects, as well as across the different financing aspects for what can be financed. Then the third aspect of that comes down to, if you will, policy, and then the financing, right? Working with both private sector funding mechanisms, whether that's associated with, as you can see on my lapel here, ESG related and SDG, or Sustainable Development Goals. So there is a strong push to bring in what we describe and what I describe as blended finance. So this is finance that is both capital markets focused as well as private market focused, working with nonprofits, family offices, and the like, to be able to help usher in this next economy as it relates to climate climate and climate finance. So there is a lot of support that is coming from the federal and state levels with the very recent Inflation Reduction Act. The Department of Energy, the EPA, and the various aspects of government are getting ready to deploy roughly $3 trillion into the U.S. economy to support these different types of activities across all different aspects. It will touch every aspect and every corner of everybody's life. It will touch every aspect of the GDP, from rail and intermodal and how we're moving transportation and the goods. The Midwest is a very key component of that, as most of you probably have heard, especially in this room with the collapse of I-95 in Philadelphia. When you think about the transportation of goods, you have the East Coast, you have the West Coast, but quite honestly, nothing moves in this country unless it goes through Chicago. So if we don't figure out how to fix the hump that this gentleman's working on and putting intermodals in place, you can't get from east to west or north to south without coming through this area and this region. So when it comes to rebuilding the infrastructure, rebuilding the rail lines that need to support increased passenger goods or increased goods as it relates to moving of materials, those same rail lines need to be reinforced and rebuttressed so that way you can have high-speed rail on them, because it turns out that to move heavy goods and machinery requires new rail infrastructure. And if you want to put in new rail infrastructure, you might as well put in rail infrastructure that trains are going 300 miles an hour. So these things are all kind of integrated: engineering, policy, and finance. And that's what my firm focuses on.
And how have you seen over the years, I guess you could look at it as a crossroads, but the relationship, I guess, between policymakers, stakeholders, and also, on the financial side, how have you seen that changed?
Sure. I would focus it back again in the recent changes on kind of this, change and recognizing what we're facing from a climate-related basis and rebuilding infrastructure with that in mind, rebuilding sustainable as well as resilient infrastructure. You're going to hear later on today, conversations around water, stormwater, wastewater. How do we manage these assets here in Illinois, especially in northern Illinois? We have a high water table. We suffer from stormwater, and we need to build deep tunnels. So where we're seeing the collaboration coming in is, the financing mechanisms are unchanged, right? There's only 5 ways to finance anything, which is equity, debt, equity-like debt, debt-like equity, and a derivative, which is just a contract. So the fundamental mechanisms to financing are unchanged. What is changing is the motivations behind supporting these different investments. What are the impacts and the benefits that the stakeholders, the global stakeholders, are involved in and what they're looking for? And how do you start to change behavior from a financing mechanism to support the infrastructure development and growth that we're looking for? So that's where we see the intersection between those 3.
Okay, thank you. All right. And Bill, we'll jump over to you. So Bill is with ComEd, and they are doing a lot of great stuff here with smart grid technologies. And if you could share with the audience a little bit about that, and then also some fun facts or facts about ComEd that people don't generally know.
Yeah, I'll just say ComEd is distinguished as one of the most reliable and affordable utilities in the nation. And I'll just give you some first quarter stats. Our beta SAIDI metric, which measures the average customer interruption duration, was best on record at 4.35 minutes, and beats our previous best of 4.93. And our beta SAIFI, which measures the average frequency, also was best on record at 0.07, favorable to target by 0.03. And I'll just kind of say that we're in terms of affordability, J.D. Powers lists ComEd as one of the lowest customer bills in the country. Our focus on continual improvement in outage mitigation and restoration processes has led to record operations while maintaining low costs, making ComEd one of the best values in the country here. I will add on some of the pieces here. We have a 2030 ComEd roadmap that outlines our plans for equitable transitions to a cleaner future. We have many key initiatives in there: equitably decarbonizing a grid, increasing flexibility and resilience, and encourage electrifications. All initiatives are supported by our ongoing projects and collaborative partnerships with our local communities, our industries, national labs, and most of our educational institutions. Many of these relationships have resulted in innovative solutions that have paid many dividends already. And as you can see from some of our reliability metrics, um, it shows up there, and it also shows up as some of our affordability metrics too. And one of the things that we're liking right now is there are a lot of data centers that are growing in size and scope um, in the territory here, and they're complex projects that connect to the grid. Before, the average data center just used to be a building. Now it's 2, 3 buildings they're trying to connect, and we have in the queue almost 7 gigawatts of load for data centers just in northern Illinois here. So that's even further growth on top of all the EV, the solar, and all the battery storage going in, all those items. So there's a lot of load that we're anticipating here going forward. And as you know, everything kind of goes through Chicago between the east and the west, or the west to the east here. And I think that's why a lot of people are locating, at least in the Midwest here.
Thanks. And then one question, sort of touch on what Larry was talking about, high water tables and things of that nature. With the increasing, I guess, volatility of weather these days, how is ComEd addressing or seeing restoration during power outages? Is it more frequent, more common, and how's the smart grid helping out with that?
Yeah, our smart grid programs is all part of a critical strategy to establish a level of reliability, resilience, and system visibility to mitigate those severe events and rapidly restore power. We have research partnerships such as ComEd and Argonne collaboration that resulted in a report that detailed the imminent risks of climate impacts to northern Illinois and strategies for mitigation. We also house a lab to test new technologies and groups that develop best practices and standards for implementations of cutting-edge equipment needed to serve those evolving needs and increase resiliency as the grid loads continue to shift. I'll just go on further that recognizing the extreme weather conditions will make increasing demands on our storm response. Our emergency preparedness team has implemented changes that are more robust. Last year, for example, we got hit by a big supercell, as everybody knows. We had 90-mile-per-hour winds, 2 tornadoes, 2,600 lightning strikes, and 180,000 customers out. We restored 80% of those customers within 12 hours, and then the last 20% of those customers within 70 hours. And, our preparedness enables us to quickly and efficiently respond to those threats as they arise and also prevent disruptions. And our distribution automation devices prevented 69,000 additional interruptions that we have on the system.
I'd just like to add on to that.
Sure.
So one of the things that ComEd is working on is Northern Illinois. So what we're working on with the state of Illinois is how do we also address these issues, the same issues in downstate Illinois as it relates to rural areas that are populations of 10,000 or less. There is a strong push to do EV. They are looking to build data centers throughout the state because of the high load that we're discussing. And once you get downstate, you don't have the ability of an Ameren or a ComEd that are these large corporates. So we're working with co-ops and small municipalities at the state level. So we have received $200 million in financing from the state of Illinois has received $200 million in financing that we're working with the state to help deploy to address the very specific issues downstate as well. So that's the collaborative effort, the collaborative nature of what I believe this Infraday is about, which is, it's not going to be one solution. It's going to be multiple solutions, and it's about building an ecosystem of understanding of opportunities, of understanding what financial tools and utilities are available to you to be able to work with organizations collaboratively, I believe, is how we're going to be able to move this forward, because the issues in Northern Illinois are the same in Southern Illinois, but the financial resources are very different.
That's a great point, Larry. Appreciate that insight. One thing also to touch on that with that, and it's more of a question for James here, is with the resources in Northern Illinois and Southern Illinois, that from a rail standpoint, that'll offer a lot of different choices, I guess, for customers with rail. And I'm curious if you could expand upon how you're working with that from a passenger standpoint, because there's DOT related transportation, there's freight in terms of rail, and then there's also passenger. I was curious if you could kind of expand upon that a little bit.
I'd be happy to. Inner city travel, particularly not just in Illinois and the upper Midwest, but throughout the country, has struggled to keep pace with the rapid growth over the last 50 years in domestic travel. Now, recent federal spending, as well as private investments in passenger expansion, are encouraging. But the question is, can the U.S. depend on viable and robust rail systems in the future to help improve and balance its transportation structure? And the main point I want to make today is railroads are different than everything in terms of passenger carriage, particularly. They are radically different because the infrastructure is privately owned. All other transportation infrastructures, highways, airports, airways, rivers, harbors, are owned by the government. And they can be adapted to any use the government deems necessary, freight or passenger, or a mix of the two. But because railroad alignments are privately owned and devoted largely to hauling freight, getting access to them for deployment as modern passenger rail routes can be difficult and cumbersome. Because the railroads are in private hands, it's difficult for government to adapt them to public use without interfering with privately owned railroads who use them to carry freight. Because of the difficulty of accessing these private rights of way, passenger development tends to be fragmentary, intermittent, and episodic rather than comprehensive and systematic. Meanwhile, the organization of the interstate highway system and the federal air traffic control system and government-financed airports focus on the design and operation of total systems. The key words are comprehensive and systematic. It means that our civil aviation infrastructure designated as a national system in which the elements can work together to enable travel between any 2 points. If you want to reach a destination on the interstate, you can drive all the way on one route until you reach your destination. Or if it's on a different interstate, we can drive along one route to a junction, use an off-ramp, and connect to that route for one contiguous trip. The highways also connect all airports with navigation equipment and professional flight controllers. Passengers can fly from any origin to any hub and airport and connect, usually within an hour or two, to an outgoing flight to a terminal airport. Because the government has designed and funded a national navigation system, the airlines are able to operate hub and spoke systems that connect the entire nation. Nothing like the federal highways or federal airways program is currently under consideration for passenger trains. Passenger trains, the routes remain fragmentary and isolated, with large gaps in the map and service between a restricted number of city pairs. Developments of corridors depend on the interest level of local and state politicians, not the kind of national priorities that led to development of the highway and airway infrastructures. There's no proposed map, no proposed operating plan for coordination of the movement. So we have challenges.
Do you see that changing in the coming years?
Well, it's going to need to if we're going to develop the kind of high-speed rail systems that can help to unbalance the way we travel in this country. Most of us have no choice but to drive or to fly, where we're going to go, and it becomes cumbersome. The successful high-speed rail routes and high-speed rail here, and we're going to need ComEd and their resources for that, because internationally, high-speed rail is somewhere north of 160 miles an hour. Usually 186 is the standard. These trains can operate at 220. Some of them are designed to operate at 240, 250 miles an hour. But you got to build a separate infrastructure, a separate right-of-way for that. It can be on the same alignment. It can be on the same alignment that current freight lines are on, particularly if there's extra room on the alignment to do it. But this has to be a closed system. You can't have at-grade crossings for 186-mile-an-hour trains. They need to get to where they're going, and they need to keep everything out of the way. It has to be anything north of 125 miles an hour requires electric propulsion that is usually overhead wires in order to feed an electric engine. So there's a lot that needs to be done. Do I see it happening? Yeah, up in Seattle, we just got invited to help on something that's been going on for 15 years in Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and into Oregon, called the Cascadia Corridor. And legit people have been working and engaging consulting engineers to do studies, and they are doing it on a very holistic basis. It's not let's just build the train and let the people come, build the rail. This encompasses utilizing trains like you're in Amsterdam, where the train operates to a station that's underneath the airline terminal, and you just get off your plane, get your bags, and go downstairs and get on a regional train to go somewhere. There's all kinds of opportunities to create additional revenue streams when you build a high-speed rail route. Out there, they've got lots of demand, and they've come up with ideas to utilize the high-speed rail route in off-peak hours to do high-speed freight, to do airport cargo. There's about half a dozen different options in addition to transit-oriented development and the economic development that spurs from having trains available in the community, of extending where people can live in order to commute to their jobs. If you've got a train that can get you there in 20 minutes or a half hour instead of having to drive and have a car for an hour and a half, it has the ability to be a gigantic stimulant of economic development.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm from Seattle, and so that I'm very familiar with that. And one of the advantages to that also is they've attracted customers, passengers as well, because obviously it's giving you time back on your commute. You get Wi-Fi access and everything else you do work, to and from. So that's been very helpful. And also having traveled abroad, noticed as well that infrastructure-wise, they're same type of thing. With you touch on a little bit about having separate lines for high speed,
right,
and things of that nature. And one question, kind of touching on that, and kind of tying it all together, is probably be for all three of you here because different perspective on each is. You talk. We've heard a lot, in advanced technology about maglev, magnetic levitation, and high-speed trains, both in Europe as well as in Japan and other regions of the world. How much infrastructure or how much work would it be to like take the infrastructure as it is today and modify that? And that's probably a question for all three of you here, from a power standpoint, from a financing standpoint, and from a rail standpoint.
Well, they use a great deal of power. They are tending to be developed for shorter distances in Hong Kong, in Asia, and some projects that are starting to go forward in Europe to take passengers from city center to airports, et cetera, in phenomenally fast times. So it's expensive. It is standalone to the point of being a one-off in terms of integration. It's not to demonize it. It's just it's a real superstar of high-speed ground transportation.
Okay. And then actually, just Larry, I was curious to get from your perspective, being on the financing side of things. I mean, how does that? What would that look like from an investment standpoint, both with policymakers as well as with private sector?
Sure. No, good question. As it relates to rail, right now, the way that I look at that, and I think that Jim had a really good statement. One of the things about rail in this country is that it's the one infrastructure asset that's privately owned. So it would take building basically a new parallel system alongside the existing freight system, unless the existing owners would allow for their system to be used for that capacity, but it's largely built for freight.
Right.
So in that regard, it would probably end up looking a lot more like a public-private partnership between the public sector that would take on the ability to build it as well as to finance it, with supports coming from the private sector considering minimum use to cover that that infrastructure investment. And then I see it primarily being used in that way. That's kind of a hybrid financing model, kind of a blend, if you will, of how things are done largely internationally with private sector participation. In the US, most of our public assets are publicly owned, so they have the ability to finance themselves using very efficient debt in the tax exempt markets. So it'd be a blended solution of being able to leverage the government cheap financing in the tax exempt markets, working with privates to operate to meet the states and the federal government's needs as it relates for policy requirements. And I view it as truly a fundamental public-private partnership. And the direction that the trains are going, I'm pointing to this gentleman, because it's going to take a lot of power.
And Bill, that next question for you, right?
Yep.
Sort of hand it off to you in terms of that from a power standpoint.
I think I liken it right to the data centers. You know, we have our processes in place and supporting load growth across all kind of several sectors in the going on right now. Our biggest one is, you know, the new data centers in our territory, as well as you know, growth in logistics and indoor agriculture. This would just be another one if this came about here.
Okay, appreciate it.
For high-speed rail we believe, to grow successfully, again, it needs to look more like our other forms of common carriers, commercial transportation, intercity transportation, like airlines, like driving, etc. We don't have that now. There needs to be, you know, the government. Someone has to decide here, do we want to have passenger trains in this country that are more than a novelty, more than, just available in certain areas, but that actually provides connectivity throughout the country. What I mentioned before was that in creating the interstate highway system and our commercial aviation system, the federal government focused on creating systems. We don't have a system for passenger trains in this country. We've got Amtrak, which is a carrier, federally subsidized carrier, but they're not a system. In a system, if I got on, I keep dropping these things, if I got on a train at Chicago Union Station to go to St. Louis, one would have an expectation of being able to book and transfer to a train that goes to Springfield, Missouri, or other points in Missouri and South. But the trains don't run there. So you get there and you have to decide in advance you decide what to do. And usually it's not to take the train because you can't take me to where I want to go. You don't have to have what we call one seat service for everything, but you have to have that connectivity. And unless you use federal policies and federal grants to create that system, and it becomes a public-private partnership, it's very complicated to figure out how you give the Union Pacific Railroad money to build out additional capacity for their railroad, and in this case, passenger train capacity. And then the minute you go to a higher speed of train, you need to segment things. You need to start putting the passenger train tracks here. If you go to high-speed rail, it's got to be fenced off and no at-grade crossings, etc. There's a lot of complexity that goes here. But there was a lot of complexity in designing an interstate highway system and in designing how we fly around in this country. It can be done. There needs to be the will to do it, but it's all about good public policy that needs to emanate from the top, and federal support. You don't have to pay for 100%. Not everybody. There are plenty of aspirants in North America and throughout the world who want to get into the passenger train business. Brightline, which is was originally part of the Florida East Coast Railroad, the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks decided to put a bunch of money into picking off a very lucrative, prospectively, route from Miami up the coast and then build new track west to Orlando International Airport. That's going to open by the end of this year. It'll be operating at 125 miles an hour for most of the route going west, 90 to 110 on the south end, and they're already, positively cash flowing on this. Brightline is also taken the lead on on building out a very necessary, if you've ever done it, way to get from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Driving is not the way. Southwest Airlines can be problematic as well, but high-speed rail operating at 186 miles an hour from the Los Angeles area to the Strip makes a lot of sense. So you can look at isolated places where the private sector looks and sees an opportunity to make money if they knew that there were policies and grants in place to be able to take that asset and improve it and be able to pay it off or just take in the grant money on a regular basis, and you could plan on that. That's how you get to that system.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the insight there. Just kind of a fast question, I guess, with technology and advancements we see today and also in recent history, the advancements have just been compounded faster and faster. And the latest buzz is artificial intelligence, what it means to different industries and different factions of industries. Curious if we could go, I guess, start with Bill and kind of work our way to Larry and then also to James about what, how you see technologies, specifically artificial intelligence, in what some people would say it's in its infancy right now, but how do you see that impacting your business today and in the future?
It's gonna have a huge impact to the electric business as well as every other business. And right now we're tracking developments in AI. We have pilots going on in a variety of areas related to our grid technologies that facilitate swift communication while improving the customer experience. Some examples are demand response and local and load forecasting. AI can analyze all kind of patterns in energy usage and predict future demands. Predictive maintenance and fault detection. We can, by utilizing machine learning algorithms, we can predict when a component of the grid may fail or need maintenance. Cybersecurity. Smart grids are vulnerable to cyber attacks that could potentially disrupt energy supply. AI can enhance the security of smart grids by detecting anomalies in the system, identifying potential threats, and implementing preventive measures. And that's just some of the things, and I'm losing my voice here all of a sudden.
That's excellent. From my standpoint, I'm primarily a financier. So the way that I look at AI is really, humans empowered by AI, just as Bill was saying. So how do you use the technology to empower people to still make certain decisions? I think AI is a great tool. I think it can be, well utilized, especially, as ComEd is envisioning it. At the end of the day, it's still data in, data out. So if you have good data or a good data set and you have a solid AI algorithm, you'll probably get solid results. But I think that it still takes, some oversight or at least some sort of, structuring in that regard. As it relates to the financing side of it and developing financing vehicles or structures along those lines, I haven't yet seen AI, kind of step up into that frame. But in terms of its use, its power as it relates to developing ideas, developing opportunities, risk metrics, performance metrics, and the like, I see tremendous opportunity and power there. Where I get excited about AI coming into this is that, again, it's driven by data. And as we think about financing in the future, the future of smart contracting, the future of tokenization along those lines to support these opportunities, I see AI being very helpful there in terms of the smart contracting and being able to predict and be able to help manage and track the underlying information that's feeding into those smart contracts.
So helping a little bit more in viability of projects, which ones to invest in, and things of that nature too. Okay. All right, and James.
There. Thanks. Railroading practices, et cetera, they're like me. They date from the Paleolithic era. But what we have to look at is how they can AI, advanced technology, et cetera, can be utilized. We actually have a success story here this week. It was in the papers last night on the news. Uh, After 20 years, the Amtrak line from Chicago to St. Louis now operates at its track speed of 110 miles an hour between Joliet and Alton, Illinois. That shaves time off of the schedule and improves reliability. They still need to finish the Chicago terminal aspect of it and St. Louis, but that's the beginnings of a viable corridor there. It took too long because they had to invent a technology, a positive train control technology that would interact with existing railroad systems, wayside signals, information that comes through the air, etc. In order to work it, they finally got it right. It's working. The trains are running 110 miles an hour. It's just shows how even in an industry like railroading, which is grounded in history, at least it's the view of it. You can come into today's environment in terms of science and technology and utilize resources and innovations in order to make things work better, faster, and cheaper.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate the insight on that. So, okay, well, gentlemen, we've got about a minute or so left here on ours, and I just wanted to kind of have you any closing comments at all? Start, I guess, with Bill and work our way back towards me.
No, I was just going to say now my voice is cleared up. These are exciting times here across the board here. You know, innovation, AI, renewables, infrastructure, all this different things that we're talking about. I mean, you start looking 20 years ago, we weren't even up here talking about all this and how things have changed over the last 20 years and what the next 20 years are going to bring. I think it's some exciting times, and it's exciting to be part of all these different industries, you know, coming together, whether it be community groups, railroads, financing, electric utilities. We're kind of all in this together. And, you know, especially with the IIJA, the Investment Jobs Act there, and IRA, the Inflation Reductions Act, we have a great opportunity here to partner together among all of us to create something that's exciting going forward.
Thank you. Larry?
I just like to build on your comments, and I agree. I think that right now this is a very exciting time. When we look at this, and I think about this Infraday conference that we're all part of, what we've been discussing is that basically our existing infrastructure, especially here in the Midwest, was built about 110 years ago during the last Reconstruction. It's been great. It was absolutely brilliant, the people who built that, and it survived for a very long time, and we've extended, I think, the life as far as we can from a proper engineering perspective for most of our infrastructure. And so it's our generation and our opportunity to build the next infrastructure for the next 100 years. And I think that it's very exciting that, this is a group that people that are going to be thoughtful about how that infrastructure is going to be built, who's building that infrastructure, and building that infrastructure with a view towards sustainability and resiliency. So it's a collaborative effort. Conversations, will spark ideas. And so I'm glad to be part of this conference and looking forward to the rest of the day.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. Our federal government has actually committed $65 billion to develop higher speed passenger rail, additional rail routes, genuine high speed rail, etc. This is a great start. It's a lot of money. Is it enough money to build, an entire national system, even an entire regional system? No, but the government needs to not just fund a project here and a project there, but to design and fund a national system over which private rail contractors can organize their efforts into a national system. The system is essential to passenger train success as it is to the success of interstate highways, airports, and air traffic control systems. We don't have systems thinking in American passenger rail, and until we do, we're not going to have successful passenger trains on a regional and national basis. It's not just a matter of building the infrastructure, it's a matter of building the systems.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.